Let's see. Bears here. Luis Cassiano, no. Christmas, yes. Mr. Doherty. Ms. Hancock. Ms. Hancock. Mr. Lodis. Lodis. Who's this? More. Bowles. Selkie. All right, good to see you all again this week during Black History Month. Today I'm talking about this beautiful black man, black priest, Venerable John Augustine, also known as Augustus Tolton. John Tolton, Augustus Tolton. You can see his dates 1854 to 1897. Born in Missouri, like Julia Greeley, right? Julia Greeley was born in Missouri, which was at this time a slave state, as you know. So he was born into slavery. His parents were slaves. All his brothers and sisters were slaves. But apparently his slave owners were also Catholic. Ms. Moore. So their slaves were baptized as Catholics. And he was baptized as Augustine, but commonly known as Augustus. Yes. And he is known as the first Catholic priest in the United States who was black, to be ordained who was black. So the first black Catholic priest of our country. Hello, Ms. Voles. Publicly, I should add, publicly known, because there were actually a couple of black men who were priests before him, but they never identified as black. They were mixed race, black and white, and they were so light-skinned you couldn't tell, so they passed as white. They never acknowledged their black roots. But he did, and how could he not? And he couldn't pass as white, obviously. Whereas the other guy, like the Healy brothers, could. One of them was the Bishop of Portland, Maine. The other was the first president of Georgetown University. But don't ask them where they came from or about their family. They would not tell you. So basically, they denied it. He did not, obviously. He was a black man. And the Civil War starts, and during the time of the Civil War, his family escapes over to Illinois, which is a free state, according to Father Gus, and I guess he would know his family history better than anybody else. His father went to fight in the Union Army in a colored regiment, while his mother and the kids ran away to Illinois to be free. If you talk to the descendants of the slaver family, the Elliots, who are still alive, according to them, they claim that their great-great-great-great-great-grandpappy actually freed all the slaves when the Civil War started and let them leave. All right. Okay. I probably would think that the Toltons would know more what happened to them than, than their family just said, hey, we're going to fight for slavery, but you know what? You're all free to go if you want to. Yeah, okay. All right. Would whites have been that generous? I don't know. 1865, he entered the local Catholic school because, of course, he was a Catholic, and he has a right to a Catholic education. That's according to church law. But that lasted about a month. He was free, Jay. Before the white decided they didn't want a little black boy at their school, so he had to leave. However, he hooked up, when I grew up, hooking up is not what people mean nowadays. He met up with an Irish priest, Father Peter McGirr, or McGeer, however you want to pronounce it. I'd say McGirr, but I've heard McGeer, so maybe that's how it is pronounced. Anyways, an Irishman in the local community, and he let Venerable Augustus come to his school, St. Peter's, and study. Which, of course, you might imagine the whites who had their children there didn't like that either, the Catholics. But Father McGeer basically told him to stuff it. He's a Catholic. He has a right to be here to learn the Catholic faith and get a Catholic education. So, yes, he's going to be here. So he did. And he was he volunteered his wish to become a priest. So, kind of, I guess, being the simple, holy, sincere guy he was, he sent out applications to the seminaries in the United States. Return to sender. You can kind of imagine the response he got. No. Yeah. It's kind of, online. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. But I read a letter he wrote to one of the rectors of a seminary about, basically trying to tell him, don't be surprised when you learn that I'm a colored man. Well, I'm sure he wouldn't have been surprised. He just would have, shut the door. He was trying to explain. So he knew he wasn't gonna. It was clear that no seminary in the United States is going to train a black man to become a priest. So Father McGeer somehow, I don't know how, finagled a spot for him over in Rome, in a seminary in Rome, the Urbanian Seminary, which was set up really to train people for missionary work. But nevertheless, seminary is a seminary. And so they sent him to Italy. So he spoke Italian. He had to learn Italian. He certainly had to learn Latin because the seminaries were all the courses were taught in Latin in the seminaries up until the 60s. So you had to know some kind of broken Latin, and all the textbooks were in Latin and the lectures were in Latin. He learned Greek, to study the Bible. So, really became really well educated, probably one of the most educated American priests, actually, had he just gone to an American seminary. And in 1886, he was ordained a priest in St. John Lateran, Mismeratesta, which we've heard about before, yes? St. John Lateran, right, Ms. Morrison? The Pope's church. It's the cathedral church of the Archdiocese of Rome, the Pope's official church. So he was ordained there, and he celebrated his first Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, which we've also heard about, the Vatican. Now, he thought he was going to go to Africa. He didn't, I guess, nobody told him what was going to happen. He didn't think he was going to go back to his home country. He thought they were going to send, he's black, they'd send him to Africa. Well, that wasn't the intention. They were going to send him back to his diocese in Illinois. And there's a famous statement by this Cardinal Giovanni Simeoni, who said to, Tolton, he said, America has been called the most enlightened nation. We'll see if it deserves that honor. If America has never seen a black priest, it has to see one now. So you're going home to serve your people, black Catholics. And I'm proud to say that his first Mass that he celebrated in the United States was in New Jersey, in the city of Hoboken. And then he traveled back all the way over to Illinois again, where, Mr. Frank, Mr. Frank, they didn't know what to do with him, He was the only, black priest, I think in the diocese. Of course, none of the white priests wanted a black priest in their rectory. White Catholics didn't want to receive the body and blood of Christ from the hand of a black man. So he ministered to black Catholics in the diocese. He set up a parish for him, a church for him to serve in eventually. And he was known as a very good and holy man. He was known as a good preacher. He had a beautiful singing voice, apparently. He sang the Mass very well, back when priests used to sing the Mass. Now they kind of sing the Mass, parts of the Mass. But in the old days, a high Mass, you sang the whole Mass. But priests don't really do that anymore. And he liked to play the accordion, Mr. Lakowitz. So at least we know he was a nerd. Nice! Anyways. And as I said, he was a good and holy man. I won't mention that. Well, maybe I do, because I might have a question about it on the quiz. And what was his life like? Just this one final point about what his life was like as a priest. He certainly I've mentioned that whites didn't want him there, but blacks didn't want him there either. Black Catholics loved him, but the black Protestants, because most blacks, if they were Christian, had come into the Protestant churches, Baptist, Pentecostal, Assembly of God. So to them, the Catholic Church was like the devil. So to have one of their own be a Catholic priest, they weren't proud of him. It wasn't the local minister, black ministers were not proud of him. So he was kind of like shunned by both sides, white Catholics and then Protestant blacks. Nevertheless, he soldiered on as a priest. He died at the age of 43, so kind of youngish, I would say. There was a real heat wave in Chicago at the time, and he was walking down the street, and he was just overcome by the heat and died. They took him to the hospital, but they couldn't save him. And his cause for canonization was opened in 2010. 2010? 1897, right? So over a century to finally call him a servant of God. And in 2019, Pope Francis declared him venerable. So, all right, he's moving up. I wish he were higher, to be honest with you. I think he should be a saint, but it's just me. I'm not the Pope. Yet. Anyways, so I asked Blessed Father Gus, well, not blessed, but Venerable Father Gus to please pray for us and for God's blessing upon us in this course. Amen. All right, where are we? Hinduism, yes? That video I was showing is a video of events at the Wagah border, north, south. I think in northwestern India with the border of Pakistan. Pakistan is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, so the official religion is Islam. India, as I told you, is technically a secular republic, although Hinduism is still looms very large. But technically, it's a secular republic, and Pakistan and India have fought a number of wars. Back in the north in the mountains, they're still kind of at a state of a cold war. Sometimes heat hots up, and there's some killings and shooting. But the two countries don't like each other, apparently. But anyways, so they do this at their border, the Wagah border. They when they close the border crossing every evening, the soldiers march, and it's all stereotyped. It's all choreographed. Down to the, down to every detail. Okay, so nothing goes wrong before they close the border. So I thought you might like to see that. Two religions in a way, the Islamic Republic and the quote unquote secular Hindu nation kind of theatrically locking horns, Nobody gets hurt unless one of the soldiers, I guess, slips and falls. But, that's what's going on in the world. I mean, imagine if we were doing that at like the border crossings of Canada. You go up to like Niagara Falls or, Detroit, you're going to cross over into Canada. Like the Marines are all high stepping it down the bridge or high stepping it down the road with the American flag, and the Canadians with their big black Busby hats and red coats are like, yeah, waving pictures of Charles III, and it might go that far. Who knows? The hatred is certainly there now, isn't it? I mean, I have to admit, even though I share more religious beliefs with the people in the Islamic Republic, I gotta pick India. If I had to think of like which side of the border crossing would I want the door to shut on for me, it'd have to be India. Just for the food. The food. That alone, Ms. Perez. Just a no-brainer. Moving on, Ms. Perez. Moving on. All right. Now we're talking about the Smriti literature. Smriti, that which is remembered, literature that does not come directly from the universe, but is indirectly related to it. Although, as we'll see, some of the Smriti literature did rise up to the level of Shruti, like the Gita, but really it's part of the Smriti. So the Smriti is not eternal like the Shruti, but derived from the Shruti and developed out of the Shruti literature. But the Smriti it's still authoritative, just not on the same level as the Vedas. But it's still authoritative. The Shruti is always authoritative, always, you know, because that, you could to put it in a Western mindset, that comes from God, even though Brahman is not God, but just to help you understand, just to kind of mix the metaphors here. But we would say, like, the Bible is the Word of God, which is different from, like, if I don't know, read a writing of a holy saint or something, like Father Augustus's life or something. That's kind of the difference. The Vedas are the Word of God, the actual Word of God. Whereas, the Smriti contains all sorts of stories and legends about holy people and other gods and goddesses and what they're up to. So it's authoritative, but not on the level as the Vedas. Yes. How's it going? What is it? It includes a huge amount of literature. Historical stuff. The Indians really didn't write history. That's why we don't know a lot of Indian history. They mainly were focused on religion. So, but with some historical stuff, law books, mythologies, okay? And the main Smritis are the Ramayana, or the Ramayan, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Shastras, plural, and Puranas, plural. And what are they? Well, whatever. The first two, the Ramayana, I'll say Ramayana, but I did have a Hindu woman in one of my classes many years ago, and she pronounced it Ramayan. Okay, fine. But I'll say Ramayana. Anyways, but you might hear it pronounced Ramayan. So the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are epics. They're epic poems. They're told like in poetry, written in poetry, really. Or is it prose? No, poetic. Maybe it might be poetic prose. Well, I'll just say they're epics. I might be misremembering if they're poetry or not. But they are epic stories. Long stories about long ago, about heroes and heroines. Right? And the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are the two greatest epics. In fact, they're sometimes together. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are called the fifth Veda. The fifth Veda. They're so important for some people, to some Hindus. Okay, and they're like instruction books about the religion. There are other ways for people to learn about the religion. I guess because the Vedas were off limits, Ms. Kepner, to the lower castes. Off limits to the lower castes. Remember, they couldn't read them, and women couldn't read them, so you had large portions of the Hindu population. How do they get educated? All right, well, the Smriti, the stories about the gods and stuff like that. Right, so it's kind of like the Veda for the people, the Veda for the lower class. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are like the Veda for the lower classes, how you learn the faith. You see similarities in Western culture. For example, if anyone's read the story of King Arthur, I haven't, nor do I want to. But I was at a seminary once, one of my many seminary forays that, ended up with me being shown the door. And I remember during the meal times, they would have readings from holy books, stuff like that, lives of the saints and stuff like that. And at one time, while you're eating in silence, listening to the reading, it was a reading from, I think the story. It was the story of King Arthur, the traditional story, and it was really weird because I noticed that it didn't. I mean, it told the story of things that King Arthur did, but then there would be these pauses and long portions where it would almost like be catechism class. It would be going over aspects of the faith, the Catholic faith and Christian faith, because Arthur was supposed to be a Christian king, the ideal Christian king, I guess. So it was I just noticed that it is weird, but if I think about it, it's kind of like our version of Smriti literature, at least the British version of Smriti literature, by telling the story of this perhaps legendary person. Maybe he existed, maybe he didn't, but you kind of throw in the religion, so that's how you get the instruction, the religious instruction in there, because maybe people couldn't read the Bible and stuff like that, so you find other ways. So people couldn't read the Vedas, so you find other ways to teach them the teachings of the Vedas and Hinduism. So the story of Rama, or Ram, I think he's most often called Ram, I'll say Rama, which was written sometime between the 200s BC and the 200s AD. Yes, Rama and Sita, I should say, because Sita is the woman, but, it's always about the man, But Rama and Sita, this husband and wife team, attributed to the Rishi Valmiki, who I guess was there and saw the story. He personally knew about it. I don't think so, but that's important in the stories. They want to make eyewitnesses need to tell them. If you don't have an eyewitness, you make one up. Anyways, Rama is a king, and he is a king, and he's considered the model of kingly virtue, how every Indian king should act and be, okay? And he's a god as well. We find out that he's not just really a human, he's actually an appearance of the god Vishnu, that we'll talk about sometime later in this course. But he's an avatar, an appearance of the god Vishnu. So he's not really human. He's just kind of the god Vishnu appearing as a human, but whatever. And he gets kicked out of his kingdom, and his wife Sita is kidnapped by a demon who takes her, captures her. Why did she get kicked out? Oh, that's right. The demon's sister. That's right. The demon has a sister, Miss Garrett. She sees I think she sees Rama in the forest, walking in the forest, and desires him, thinks he's handsome, and wants him. And he rejects her. So he hurts her feelings, and she goes back to her brother and complains. So the brother goes and kidnaps Sita and takes her to where they live on the island of Sri Lanka. Where is Sri Lanka? I think we looked at Sri Lanka before, but we'll look at it again. It's off the coast of India. Yeah. Okay, so it's this country down here at the southern tip of the country of India. We have this country called Sri Lanka, the holy. Yes. I'm still debating whether I'm going to tell you what that means, but anyways, it comes from Hindu mythology. Yeah. Anyways, but Sri Lanka, he captures Sita and holds her, and Rama. Basically, the Ramayana is the story of Rama's attempt to go to Sri Lanka and get back his wife. And in the course of this, he's helped by Hanuman. Yes, that we've heard of before, the monkey god Hanuman and his army. They link their tails together and can create a monkey bridge between India and Sri Lanka so that Rama can cross over it. All right. And whatchamacallit? Yeah, okay. And he gets his wife back. All right. He gets Sita back. So Rama is the epitome of kingship, and Sita is the epitome of purity. And this is a very influential story. It's not the happiest of stories if you're a woman or a feminist. you know, it's actually not a very nice story, I guess, for the female side, because the problem is this: Sita, who's a married woman, has spent her time in the house of another. Yes. So, what was she up to, Mr. Kettner, with the demon? And the demon's name, by the way, is Ravana. Ravana the demon. So, Ravana kidnaps her, takes her to his home. She's living there for a period of time before Rama comes to save her. Yes, Valmiki's the one who supposedly witnessed the story and wrote it. But Ms. Garrity, like, what was she doing with Ravana in the meantime? You know? Naked pretzel? With Robin? Get out the mustard. You don't know. And in some cultures, that's a married woman. She doesn't stay in the house of a man that she's not married to. Certainly not a relative, unless it's a relative, a relative, or son or brother. But to stay in the house of another man who's not her husband? No. You don't do that. Because they assume adultery. They assume sex is going on. Why else would you be there? What's going on? I know today. Well, you can't assume. You don't know. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, just go with it. This seems out of place. Is this bothering you? It's bothering me. All right. Anyways, so there's Rama is like, he accepts Sita back, even though, he is a little bit worried that maybe she did get into temptation. You never know. Ravana was a demon, but maybe he was a handsome demon. So Sita sits in a fire, kindles a fire and sits in it, and does not burn, and that shows her purity. It's a miracle. The fire does not consume her. So it shows her purity. She has not violated her virtue in the adultery of Ravana. Okay, fine. So Rama accepts that proof, Mr. Sneed, and he and Sita go back home to the kingdom, and he becomes king again. However, you know how people talk, right, Mr. Churchill? TMZ, X, Blue Sky. Well, I think Blue Sky is the next one, right? You can see things that basket on Blue Sky. Still say nasty stuff on X, right? Really have a flame war, right? Anyways, so people are talking behind Rama's back about Sita. You know what? She spent all that time with this demon, Who knows what she might have done with him or to him? Hope there are no videotapes knocking around. And Rama hears this, and he feels like it's undermining his authority as the king. So he's like, you know what, Sita, I got to get rid of you. I got to exile you. Even though I think you're pure, didn't do nothing. But you got to take the fall. So he kicks her out. And Sita prays to the goddess of the earth, to swallow her up because she knows she's innocent. And then the goddess of the earth obliges and swallows. So, all's well that ends well, right? Ms. Malatesta? It's a festivus miracle. So, but this had religious implications because there developed the practice later on in Hinduism that a righteous Hindu woman, when her husband died before her, which was not right, if she died before the husband, okay, but if the husband died before her, what she's supposed to do, she can't remarry. She's supposed to stay a widow for the rest of her life, never go out, certainly not be around other men who aren't her husband, because she has to constantly honor her husband. So what some widows would do is they would imitate Sita when she put herself into the fire. They burn themselves to death. When they're burning the body of their husband, the woman would get up on the pyre with the husband's body, his corpse, and lie down and burn with it. Called puja, offering. An imitation of Sita. The Mahabharata. The Mahabharata. Maha means great, large. Okay? And Bharata or Bharat is the word for India, the Sanskrit word for India. But to me, I like to interpret it like, well, when I was growing up, this would make sense. We don't have anything like this anymore. It's kind of like, well, what is it? The Kardashians. The Kardashians are old, right? That's like 2000s. Who is it now? Vanderpump Rules? Reality shows about a family? I don't know. I don't keep track. In my day, I would think of Dallas, the miniseries, not the miniseries, the television show Dallas, or like Falcon Crest or Dynasty, which you can find like on Netflix or Hulu or something, old episodes. But that's kind of like what's going on. This is the great story of the Bharata, or the India family. It's like the story of India. India's epic, where we come from, how great we are. But the great story of the Bharata family, written sometime between the 400s BC and the 400s AD. So over almost 800 years, constantly being added to. So it's extremely long. It's attributed to Vyasa, this rishi named Vyasa, who may or may not have existed. Okay, and may or may not have been present at the stories in the Mahabharata. But anyways, and as I said, it's huge. According to my information, it's the longest epic poem. Oh, it is poetry. The longest epic poem in existence. But then, you got 800 years, Mr. Frank, to just add stuff to it. If it were one person who did it, I'd say, okay, yeah, it deserves that. Guinness Book of World Records, longest epic poem in existence. But when you've got 800 years of people adding stuff and on. All right, well, we'll take that for what it's worth. It's just very, very long. Maybe the longest epic poem in human history. And filled with all sorts of different books and stories. But the overarching storyline is about this Bharata family. Okay? Yeah. Again, a king. It's the story of a king, his two sons, their children, and all of them fighting over the kingship after the father dies. So if any of you are watching, what's it, the Yellowstone that has, what's his name in it? What's his name? Guy who played Robin Hood on Waterworld. The actor. Dances with Wolves. Can't remember his name. But anyone watch Yellowstone? Huh? Not Casey. No, he's an actor. The old guy, really in Yellow. Huh? The dad, yeah. Can't remember it. I can see his face right in front of me. The Postman. Oh. Dances with Wolves. From the 90s. It won all sorts of Oscars. Anyways, I didn't watch it, but apparently a lot of people did. Thought it was a good film. Kevin Costner, thank you. Yeah, Yellowstone. About this family, oil, what is it, oil or something? Or no, it's not maybe Yellowstone. What's the one about the oil? Where they're oil diggers or oil prospectors. It's another miniseries that I don't watch these things. I have no interest in them, but Huh? Okay, yes, Landman. All right. And they're all fighting amongst each other and the family members and stuff. It's the same thing that's going on here in the Mahabharata. The king has two sons. They both want to be king. The king dies. The sons can't get along in sharing the kingship, so there's going to be a fight eventually. All right? And that's kind of like where the whole Mahabharata is leading up to, this huge battle at a place. Well, it's not on this slide. I think that's on the next slide. Oh, it's not? Oh, Bhagavad Gita. All right, well. Kurukshetra, the battle of the land of the sons of Kuru, or Kurukshetra, the battle of Kurukshetra. So really the whole story is leading up to this immense battle between the sons and within the family. Because, and I'm going to, collapse the whole story. I have not read the whole Mahabharata, and I have no intention of reading the whole Mahabharata. Apparently, they did do a mini-series on Indian television way back when. I don't know if it was dubbed into English. I might watch it if I can find it on YouTube or something sometime. But whatever. But I know what the basic story is, the plot. All right. Yeah, there's the question of succession. Who becomes king after the father dies? And so you've got the two sons and two families, right? Representing two ancestors. One's named Pandu and the other is Kuru. All right, their ancestor. So one group is called the Pandavas and the other is called the Kauravas. Okay. The sons of Pandu, the Pandavas, and the sons of Kuru, the Kauravas. Kind of like if any of you have ever done musical theater and you've done what you would call a West Side Story, the two gangs, I forget what their names are, but anyway, they're the two gangs, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, who are following one of these two sons. The sons, if you're curious, I don't think I put it on the PowerPoint. No, I don't. The one son who's leading the Pandavas is called Yudhishthira. His name is Yudhishthira. And the one who is leading the Kauravas is Duryodhana. Duryodhana. And if you're wondering, Duryodhana is the bad guy. Yudhishthira is the good guy. Okay. What did I say? The Pandavas was Yudhishthira, right? Just so you can see. Say Yudhishthira. Duryodhana. Duryodhana. So Duryodhana is the bad guy. How do you remember? Well, Duryodhana is the dope. All right, so that's how I kind of remember who's good and who's bad. Anyways, but what happens is there's a falling out, okay? They can't get along, and Duryodhana exiles Yudhishthira from the kingdom for a period of time. Okay? And the promise is that after this period of time, you can come back and you can regain your part of the kingship. That's my promise. Okay? But, you have to leave for a period of time. Again, I'm collapsing the story down a lot, okay, because I'm trying to save time. But that's basically the gist. And so Yudhishthira obliges, and he goes into exile into the forest for a number of, I think it's like 13 years or something was the agreed upon time, something around there. And when, finally his time has come up, he comes back to the kingdom and reveals himself. He returns, says, "Here I am." However, Duryodhana the dope refuses to honor the agreement. Because he's king, he's been fully king for over a decade. So he's like, I don't know what agreement. I don't know. It was verbal. Get a lawyer, Well, Yudhishthira does more than that. He gathers an army, and there's going to be a fight, over the matter. And so some parts of the family side with Duryodhana as the king, and others are like, no, Duryodhana, you made an agreement, and they side with Yudhishthira. And they meet in the land of the sons of Kuru, in Kurukshetra, to fight. And it's an extremely, extremely bloody battle. Okay? It's each side does. There were rules of war back then. Some of them are quite interesting. For example, you couldn't strike an unarmed man in battle. If he didn't have a weapon, you could not do anything to him. If the other person did not have the same kind of weapon as you couldn't fight that person. So it's kind of like we say, in our, hey, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Right? That's okay. You bring a knife to a gunfight, Mr. Zelke, and I shoot you. Hey, you shouldn't bring a knife to a gunfight, right? Not according to the Hindu rules of war. If I have a gun and you have a knife, I have to wait for you to get a gun before we can fight. I can't just shoot you. So there are rules of war. You had to behave honorably. Well, that goes by the wayside very quickly. Okay, so it's a disaster, this battle. Okay, in the midst of this battle, we have this character named Arjuna. Arjuna. See at the bottom of the PowerPoint. And this guy, Arjuna, is a charioteer, and he's the one who's in his chariot with his hand up and when ready to call for the battle to start. Both sides are arrayed against each other. And Arjuna is in his chariot. There he is with his assistant, who just happens to be a god named Krishna, but he doesn't know that. And Arjuna is like ready to give the call to begin, let the bloodshed begin. And as he is looking across at the enemy, he sees family, of course, because they're all of the same, family. He sees brothers, well, not sisters, but he sees brothers, friends, teachers, gurus, people who've taught him, Ms. Kepner. And now, he's going to give the order to slaughter these people. And he can't do it. He can't do it. He pauses, and in this pause and he starts having a conversation with his assistant, who is the god Krishna, but he doesn't know that, about, really the meaning of life in a manner. Why is this happening? And here we have one of the most famous, and it's part of the Shruti, yes? I told you it's part of the Shruti, the Vedanta. Oh, no, excuse me, not part of the Shruti, the Upanishads. It's part of the Vedanta, but it's Smriti. And even though it's Smriti, it might as well be Shruti, because the Bhagavad Gita is probably one of the most famous Hindu writings that anyone would read. The Song of the Lord. Bhagwad means Lord. Gita means song. So it's the Song of the Master, meaning Master Krishna, really, or Vishnu. Written sometime in the 1st century BC, before Christ. And so they have this discussion, Arjuna and Krishna, about, as I said, the meaning of life and what to do. Because Arjuna does not want to do, he doesn't want to fight, He doesn't want to fight. And so he wonders, and so it goes through maybe, it's a good, also kind of good summary of Hindu religion, because it goes through the various responses that Hinduism traditionally proposes for how to deal with life. Yogic meditation, doing good actions, stuff like that. And they kind of go through each of them and discuss them, Arjuna and Krishna, and kind of arrive at, well, what's the best of these actions? What's of all the actions that I can do? And that's just doing your duty and having devotion to the gods, basically. Anyone like to read this from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3? Anybody?
One's own duty to the practice is better than another's duty. That is performing one's own duty is preferable. The performance of the duty of others is danger.
Yeah. What's translated here as duty is our old friend Dharma. Okay, so everyone has a Dharma. Krishna tells Arjuna that your Dharma is to be a warrior. That's your caste. And so that is your duty. And so you should practice your Dharma to the best of your ability. What do warriors do? Well, warriors have to fight. They have to kill other people sometimes. They have to destroy property. Okay? Do all sorts of things like that. And this is one of those situations. So it's your dharma, even if you don't want to do it. And you could say, well, nah, forget it. I'll go and become a monk. You know, I don't want to be a soldier anymore. I want to become, become some ascetic. Some yogi in the mountains. And I'll be the best ascetic ever. That would still be a bad thing because that's not what you're called to, Arjuna. In fact, performing another's dharma better is worse. No matter how well you might perform the dharma of a monastic or someone else, to get away from your dharma is to be a warrior. And that's where you find perfection. Okay? So, yes, you're going to have to go and kill all these other people to do what you're supposed to do, so call the battle. All right? So that's the ethic. How do you and then it proposes bhakti, or devotion to the gods. You do your duty that you're supposed to do without question and perfectly, but you do it in the context of your devotion to the gods, knowing that you're doing it, for them, I guess. So we'd like to read this section from chapter 9 of the Gita, where Krishna starts and we have a reading from the Gita, where Krishna starts revealing who he is. He's not just this assistant to Arjuna. He actually is, a god in hiding, Yes, no? Thank you, Ms. Wamble.
I am the ritual, I am the sacrifice, I am the offering to the ancestors, I am the herb, I am the mantra, I am the verified butter, I am the fire, I am the oblation. I am the father of this world, the mother, the maintainer, the grandfather, the object of knowledge, the purifying filter, the syllable the rig, the sama, and the Yamper Vedas too. Path, bearer, Lord, witness, who, refugee, friend, origin. Refuge, friend, origin, dissolution, continuity, repository, imperishable seed. I radiate, I withhold the rain, and I let it come down. I am immortality and death. I am the existent and the non-existent. Arjuna.
Yeah, so just, a fancy way I think of saying I'm everything. I'm absolutely everything. Or I'm in everything. Remember Advaita, yes? It's kind of where you start seeing the idea, or not start seeing the idea, but you see the idea of Advaita. There's no duality here. Krishna, the God, who is also Vishnu, the God, is in everything, and everything is him. From the sacrifice, starts out with the sacrifice, to the Vedas, okay, to opposites, like being and non-being, that's me, rain and drought, that's me, life and death, that's me, mother and father, me, all right, so there's nothing that's not me. I am Om, which is a very famous, sacred syllable, constantly used in meditation amongst Hindus. Supposedly, it imitates the actual sound of the universe, so it is divine in and of itself. Very important. That's me. So it's kind of like another way of saying I am the ultimate God. Notice that I am the Rig, the Sama, and the Yajurvedas. Doesn't mention the Atharva, interestingly enough. So it's another little detail in this field that makes scholars think, maybe the Atharva was added on later. These little things build up, little evidences. Okay, I'm the offering. That's what oblation means. So the sacrifice. Butter is also offered in the sacrifices, melted butter, okay, and herbs and things to the gods. So it's just stating, even the parts of the sacrifice are parts of me. I'm in them. So do your duty and offer it to me, basically, is what Krishna is telling him. Cast all your cares on the Lord, yes, in a manner of speaking. All right, but do your duty, and then have devotion or bhakti to the gods. In this case, Vishnu. All right, and that's how you achieve liberation. Okay, what you call it? Yeah. Bhakti. There we go. All right, bhakti, which simply means the Sanskrit word, which means devotion or piety, reverence. Okay, you honor the god. You place it in the hand of the god. You do exactly what your dharma is supposed to be, and everything else you place in the hand of the god that you worship. And here's a picture of Arjuna and Krishna. Here's the chariot. And this is the moment where he reveals in one moment, Arjuna says, let me see your form, let me see you, what you look like. And he reveals himself through all the incarnations, the avatars of Vishnu. This is Krishna. Some of these I can identify, some of these I have no idea because I'm not a Hindu expert. Someone who is a Hindu will probably know these. Here's Hanuman, the monkey god, that I recognize. I think that's also might be Hanuman. Ganesh, the elephant-headed god. Yes, Ganesh. Yes. No, this would be Shiva. That's Shiva. That's Vishnu. Shiva. Is that Brahma? I think that might be the god Brahma. All right. And some of these look female, so they might be like Kali and Parvati. These two look female to me. Anyway, so in one fell swoop, Krishna slash Vishnu reveals to Arjuna his divine form, all his manifestations. Okay? In the Bhagavad Gita. And then, Arjuna calls for the battle, and the battle starts, and there's a lot of killing. And the story moves on to all sorts of other stuff. Okay, but the Bhagavad Gita was considered such, and it's not very long, but it's considered such a classic. It's been taken out. It is part of the Mahabharata, but it's been taken out, and it can be read solely on its own. Now, how to live your dharma? Well, people had that question. If dharma is the thing, follow your dharma. Well, you have books of dharma, manuals of law and conduct. Dharma Shastra. Shastra, Sanskrit for a book. Book of law book, Dharma Shastra. And we have a number of Dharma Shastras written between, and I'm talking about the laws of Manu, but we have a number of Dharma Shastras written throughout history. But the one I'm focusing on is what's called the Manu Smriti, or the laws of Manu. Manu Smriti, the laws of Manu, written sometime between 100 BC and, 300 AD? Yeah. La, la, la. Which is the most important compilation of laws for Hindu ethics. Manu is considered a mythical lawgiver, kind of like Moses for the Jews. All these laws supposedly come from him. If he existed, who knows? And it discusses each person's dharma and duty according to their caste and stage of life. Whether you're one of the upper castes, like a ruler or a merchant, or if you're a peasant in the lower caste. And then for each one, what state of life are you? Are you a student? Are you a householder? Are you an ascetic? A forest dweller? There are different stages of life. And what are the duties for those? So, for example, you are all in the student stage, obviously. The earliest stage. Most of you are unmarried, okay, I imagine. But so you're in school. So you would be studying the Vedas. If you're of the higher caste, if you're of the peasant low caste, you would not be. But if you're of the higher castes, you would be studying the Vedas as a student. That would be your dharma. And that's all you would do, is, as you saw those little boys, memorize the Vedas. Learn to sing the Vedas and understand them. And be completely devoted to your teacher. Yes. I might talk about the other orders later. We'll see if I can get to it. But anyways, right now you're a student. The next one that I'll mention is householder, where, basically you get married and you have a family and you start a business. You make money. make money and make kids. That's the next stage. You're a householder, and then you do that. All right. And then finally, the mythology, the myths, Puranas. Purana means a story about ancient times. The word Purana simply means old, as you can see there on the PowerPoint, old. So stories about old times, myths, often about the creation of the world or the creation of humanity. A lot of times it also introduces the origins of a god, where a god or a goddess came from, how they came to be god or goddess or appeared, And there are a lot of them. Every area of India seems to have its own collection of Puranas of different gods and goddesses. Anyways, so it's written, the Puranas written between 400 and 1500 AD, 400 and 1500 AD. Legends, they said, about the creation of the cosmos, where it comes from, what it's made up of, how the cosmos works, ancient kings, and all sorts of other stuff. The most famous, if we had to take just one, if I had to look for just one, it would be the Bhagavata Purana, the myth about the Lord, written in 900 AD, which I think is devoted to Brahma, but don't quote me about that. But anyways, the Bhagavata Purana. Oh, that's why. Yes, excuse me. Krishna, not Brahma. Krishna. If you want to see the kind of like where the stories of Krishna start arising, you look to the Bhagavata Purana, okay? Because that's where this character, Krishna, seems to appear, I guess for the first time? I think. All right, won't worry about that. I might mention Krishna later on when I get to Vishnu. All right, so that's the Smriti literature. All right. Now I'm going to get into some of the main beliefs. I can't hit all of them, obviously. It's a huge religion, old religion, but I'm going to hit some of the major stuff that you might encounter. The first being this idea of Brahman that I've mentioned before, mentioned several times actually, which is the Sanskrit name for the ultimate underlying source of reality. So ultimate reality itself is Brahman, from the Sanskrit word brih or brimh, which means a growing, expanding, increasing. Okay, it's kind of how Hindus understand where the world came from, that it was more of an emergence. Almost like, with birth, a woman expands, her belly expands, and the child comes out. Kind of same idea of the universe kind of being born in a way, growing. All right, which is interesting because if you think about the Big Bang Theory, that's kind of like where they are with that it was more like a growing and an emergence and a split of a split of a split of a second, just almost like a balloon, just like immediately blowing up. Okay, so they look for the stretch marks. I mean, they even talk about it in terms of pregnancy. The gravitational waves, those are kind of like the stretch marks of the universe. The universe expanded at the Big Bang so quickly that it kind of strained the outer limits, I guess, and caused what are called gravitational waves. Still haven't found any, but we're looking. Hinduism already had that kind of idea in Brahman, an expansion, an increase. So it's not a creation. If you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, you think in terms of creation and the creator God. No, there's no creator God here. Well, we'll come to Brahma, the creator, later, and I'll explain that one. But no, there is no creator God who just like boom, snaps his fingers or speaks a word and everything comes into existence. No, it emerges. In the Vedas, now I'm going to talk about the development of the idea. Early on, we find Brahman discussed in the Atharva Veda, the latest of the Vedas. The Atharva And the word just seems to be used in the sense of the source of power. The power that is contained in the ritual is Brahman, the power. Okay, so maybe you can start seeing how people could connect the performance of the ritual with actually cosmic consequences, right? If Brahman is contained in the very ritual, then you're manipulating Brahman as well, the cosmos, all right? So that's what its original meaning, the power of the formula of the ritual, but later in books like the Brahmanas, which I know it sounds the same and it's kind of spelled the same, but it means more of the priests because there's Brahman and Brahmin, and sometimes they're even just spelled the same. Sorry about that. Just go with it. Brahman. Oops. How am I doing this? I got this. Brahmin is a priest. Okay? The highest caste is Brahmin. Right? The priests. But sometimes you'll also see it spelled as Brahman. And we'll also see it later as Brahma with no N, which is the creator God. Just go with it, please. I'll try to be repetitive about it, so I keep hitting it. So, it'll kind of sink in. But anyways, so the Brahmins are performing the sacrifices in which their ritual mantras have Brahman to them. They have power. Power, yes. And during the sacrifice, they might actually be praying to Brahma, the god. Oh, I love to see the smiles on my students' faces. Thank you, Mr. Brett. I appreciate that. So when we get to the Brahmanas, which are instructions, Ms. Kepner, for the Brahmins and how they should perform the sacrifices, this word Brahman comes to mean the ultimate and supreme power of the universe. Okay, so it's transferred. It's not just the power contained in the formulae used in the ritual, the magical formulas, but it also becomes extended to Brahman as the supreme power of the cosmos, the absolute, you might say. So you see that kind of development, that extension to the cosmos. And this idea also appears in the Upanishads. Right, Ms. Boaggio? You are Brahman and Brahman is you. This phrase keeps coming up in the Upanishads. Non-duality. There is no difference between you and Brahman. You are Brahman and Brahman is you. The ultimate, the absolute. So Brahman is seen as the origin and basis of all existence, knowledge, experience. Again, that kind of highlights, Mr. Lakowitz, why Hinduism is more concerned with knowledge than like savior or something like that. It's your knowledge that liberates you. Liberation by knowing, and of course doing, but knowing, knowledge, because knowledge is divine. All right. And Brahman pervades everything. That's a big word in Hinduism. Pervades. In Christianity or Judaism or Islam, they'll talk about God existing. God exists everywhere. But Hinduism doesn't like to use that language. It talks about pervasion. The Brahman pervades everything. It undergirds reality. It's in. Everything is it, and it is everything. So I guess that's what they're trying to capture, that meaning. Brahman is not, as I said, it's not a god. It's not a creator god. Brahman does not create anything. It produces. All things emerge out of Brahman. Again, remember the word, what the word means. All things emerge. The universe, you, plants, the gods, the goddesses, the demons, the demonesses, the spirits, the ghosts, everything comes out of Brahman. So yeah, you're related to the gods, but you're also related to the bad gods, the demons, the Asuras. Take that and and smoke it, Miss Boagio. You know what I'm saying? Yeah? Well, don't smoke it because it's unhealthy. Yes, I know. Unless you're smoking pot, apparently that's okay. Getting cancer from smoking pot that's great. The state will give you a license. You know, hey, open it up. You want the tax money, but smoking a Marlboro, oh, that's death. It's like snorting cocaine, right? Brahman is indescribable and undefinable. It's also unknowable. Okay. That doesn't mean it's incomprehensible. Well, it means it's incomprehensible. Because, yeah, I'm a Christian. Christian God is also incomprehensible, can't be fully understood, but he's not unknowable. But Brahman is, by nature, unknowable. And Brahman has no qualities or attributes, except three that are traditionally identified and attached to Brahman, called by the word Saksidananda. Three Sanskrit words, Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat, which means being, if I remember correctly, check my notes in a second, but I think I'm right. Sat, which means being. Chit, which means consciousness. And Ananda, which means bliss. Like happiness, I guess you could say. Yeah, Sat, existence. So Brahman is pure, unqualified existence. That's it. And Chit, as I said, is consciousness. So Brahman is self-enlightened. If there were a self in Brahman, which there isn't. But I add that to make it comprehensible to us. And Ananda, as I said, is bliss. Say happiness, but bliss. Okay? Ultimate fulfillment. A feeling of ultimate fulfillment. But any qualities, how do human beings relate to Brahman? Well, through the gods. That's what the gods and goddesses are for. And even to a certain extent, the demons and demonesses. They allow us to relate to this unpersonal thing called Brahman. And then we superimpose the gods, the qualities we want onto them. But they're not really Brahman. You're just experiencing Brahman through Vishnu or Shiva. So love and mercy and stuff like that you might have in the gods, your devotion to the gods. They allow you to experience those things. But Brahman, no. Brahman is not a personal god. It's neutral. It's impersonal. It's simply and it manifests itself. It pervades everything, but then it manifests itself through gods and certain things. So for Hinduism, the word that would traditionally and has been traditionally used to describe its view of divine reality is polytheism, polus, in Greek, not Latin. In Greek means many. So, how am I going to work this? One hand wants coffee, one hand wants to write on the board. What am I going to do? Polus means many, so many gods. Okay. Westerners that helps Westerners understand they're not monotheists. They don't believe in monos, one God, many gods. But for Hinduism, that's to be expected. It's not, Hindus don't view it as polytheism in that sense because there is no polus. There's just Brahman, one. Remember, there's non-duality, Advaita, so there really is no many. That's an illusion. These various gods that we think we're worshiping, whatever one you worship, so it doesn't really matter which God you kind of worship in a way, one God exclusively or many gods at the same time, because they're all leading back ultimately to the same ultimate, Brahman, which is the source of the gods as well. There are ways of approaching Brahman. So the multiplicity of gods is kind of like logical for Hindus. don't see any real problem with it. Whoops. Oh. Can I get to the Trimurti? Where's the Trimurti here? Yeah, there's the Trimurti. I'll get to the Trimurti. But if out of the gods we wanted to say, okay, which are the gods that are most important, out of the many, many, many gods in Hinduism, which are the gods that are the most important to honor and worship? Which ones kind of lead you, I guess, most clearly or directly to Brahman? Okay, well, we do have some choices. We got three at least. Even though, as I said, Hinduism is polytheistic, it's many gods, even though Hindus might not understand it the same way. They do have a supreme god that symbolizes Brahman. They did create a god to symbolize for Brahman, even though Brahman is not a god, called Ishvara, or Ishwara. And people might pray to Ishvara, but not really. I don't think most Hindus do. But there's there's like a king. I guess you could say it's kind of like Zeus. There's a king of the gods in a manner of speaking, Ishvara. There's a god that represents Brahman. Why isn't that god like the main god for Hindus? I don't know. It's not part of these three gods, the triad, the Trimurti that we'll see when we come back on Thursday. So God bless you all. Thank you for spending time with me, Ms. Free-J. Mr. Sinsky. Have a good day, sir.